Hey everybody, Simone here with Bulletproof Business Growth, as always with some ideas and insights what to pay attention to when you're growing and scaling your business. Now in the last couple of weeks we've been talking a lot about strategic planning, getting prepared and ready for this next quarter that's on our plate right now. And part of that, of course, is making sure that you're really dialing in the way that you use your resources. So I want to talk a little bit about how you build that lean productive machine that your team is, that everybody contributes to. And really maximizing resources means you're not wasting any of your time, money, and energy where you absolutely have no room to waste it, right? So in small businesses, we always want to talk about or think about protecting the big three when you're looking at how do we dial things in, how do we make things leaner, how do we make sure that every dollar counts. So protecting the big three is, of course, people, your marketing, and your mentorship, because without those three always optimized, you'll have bigger problems down the road, right? So you really want to look at, and today we're just going to talk about the people portion, but you want to look at every single role on your team has to return your investment, right? So you have to find ROI out of every single role. So every single role and responsibility must be aligned with revenue generating activities. And you may have heard me say this before, but the size and quality of your team is in direct relationship to the size and quality of business that you can build. So of course, to have that absolute A team that can help you really build out your vision, that can help you grow, that can help you create amazing results, you got to have all 8 players on your team. And you know what? That needs time. You can't just build a team like that overnight. A lot of times when you kind of start on that route, it means for a lot of our clients, when they come in first, they have to do a lot of cleanup. And the cleaning up is on all fronts, because partly it is cleaning up you and the way that you show up as a CEO, the way that you show up as a leader. And then, of course, making sure that you have the right people on the bus. But you can only really have the right people on the bus, and you can really only know that if you are giving them the clarity, the certainty, and really the autonomy that they need so they can do an amazing job for you, and they can keep elevating the level of business that you have. So we have to make sure that part of this whole process is, like we've been talking about, planning, right? So planning is creating the clarity for them so they understand exactly where the business is going, whether it's for the quarter or for the year or long term. But they need to understand the context that they're, like, all their activities, what's the context for it? Where is this going? How does this all work together, right? So this is something that you have to deliver as a leader, because without that, they can't really deliver any output. So when we are trying to build this team and optimizing, maximizing really the productivity that you have going on, that means you have to forecast what roles will you need. So you have to always hire ahead of the curve, because when you're not forecasting, when you're not being strategic about this, and your business is outgrowing the level of support and the level of expertise you have on your team, now you have a real problem. And you never want to get in that place. So you have to really look at, it's like, the way the business is growing, what skills do we need, what kind of higher level person do we need, how do we support what we're actually creating here. So, and that doesn't happen, like I said, overnight. So you have to forecast, and you have to make sure that you hire before you really need that person. But then there's this kind of, chicken or the egg questions, like how far ahead of the need do you actually hire? Because when you hire too far ahead, it's going to cost you a lot of extra cash, and you don't really want to do that. But if you hire behind the 8 ball, then suddenly you're creating all sorts of bottlenecks that it might mean that you have a bunch of really unhappy clients because you can't deliver. Your reputation might suffer. So you want to make sure that you get this part right. So that's part of why strategic planning is so important, because planning your hiring and planning your roles and all that is a huge part of that. So most of the time, most of our clients, when we work with them in the beginning, they've been hiring too late. So they hire out of need, right? They just suddenly something happened. Suddenly they need, somebody quit, or some like big project came in, and suddenly they need to hire, and they're totally unprepared. And then of course they don't make the best hire. So then there's a lot of problems going on. So we want to make sure that you really start learning how to hire efficiently, which is absolutely crucial for the momentum, for the growth that you're creating in your company. So, because if we don't have enough people on the team or the right skill set, like I just said, it means we have poor execution, or if you have too many people, there's a lot of waste, and then bye profit, because that's where it goes. So you have to make sure that you dedicate your resources to opportunities that really move the needle. So you have to understand what those are to start with. What are the opportunities that will really move the needle for us, and what are the resources we need to dedicate so that we can support that process? Because far too often roles are kind of ambiguous, and they're focused on tasks and they're not tied to income. Because you might have hired somebody for X, and then the business evolves, and then that person kind of stays in their little corner, but they're not evolving with the business. So that means they are not maximized in their efficiency, in their productivity, and of course in their output, right? So we have to make sure that happens, because it dilutes the effort across non-essentials when you look at that. And also roles stagnate rather than evolve with company and customer needs. So we want to keep looking at, what do we actually need? What do we need it for? And what's most important? What are the priorities that we're focusing on? So part of that means that you have to do role audits fairly often. And you have to understand, you have to learn which roles that we have on our team really impact the money that we make, right? So what impacts our revenue? Which roles really do? And as your company grows and scales, what do you really need to add, and where do you need to add as you scale, so that you can support that effort, and that you're suddenly not high and dry, or everybody is working 24/7, which also doesn't produce the best outcomes. So you have to understand what and where you need to add as you grow. And then you also have to understand, which roles are relevant to what you're doing right now as your company is changing, and where do you need to restructure. And, sometimes that means, what I see a lot is that we have all these people who are kind of all doing the same stuff, and nobody is really quite maximized in what they're doing. So a lot of times in that scenario, 2 people could be doing what right now 3 are doing. And a lot of times our clients don't like that when I say that, because they're like, oh, all of our team members they're working hard, they're working all these hours, they can't take on more. We cannot eliminate anybody. But then when we start looking at, what are these people actually doing, and what if what they're doing is actually contributing to company strategy and company direction and creating revenue, of course, and then we can actually trim quite a bit of fat there, and sometimes make the team a lot more efficient that way. So we need to make sure we understand that, because as markets change all the time, the market has been changing a ton in the last 2 years. So changing market dynamics means that we have to adapt and really stay effective with this. So we want to really optimize our capacity by realigning the staff to strategic priorities. And now again, we've been talking about planning. If you haven't done your planning, you don't know what your strategic priorities are. And if that quarterly plan isn't aligned to an annual plan, if that annual plan isn't aligned to a long-term plan, we have more and more gaps, right? All these things are super important. So you've got to have this in place. If you don't have this in place yet, make sure. I'm going to put a plug right now. I'll say it later again. We have a great workshop coming up July 15th through 18th. So make sure you come to that because we're going to go over all this, everything I'm talking about today, everything that we've been talking about. We're going to go over all of this in detail and give you a great leg up for this next quarter happening. So we want to make sure that we keep pushing all of our resources towards the highest and best use scenario. And part of that is you have to transition your team to this, and they have to learn what this means. So you need to have a lot of transparency about expectations that you keep talking to your team about, because that really helps them to create accountability and ownership. So if they understand how things are changing, then they can actually step up and they can lean in and they can help you in this transition, versus when they don't know about this and they're just seeing all these changes and they're not being part of the change, they're not going to contribute to the change. I hope this makes sense. But that's really, really important. As you change the way you do things, you have to bring your team with you or they're going to be resistant. And that's going to slow down your momentum and the timing of this very much so. So you have to make sure that you bring them along, right? So part of that is, as you restructure this, as we've been talking about, you want to give really clear KPIs and targets that are linked to everybody's roles. So everybody has to understand, like, as we've been talking about planning, right? You have your company plan, every individual should have their individual plan, and those individual plans should all include KPIs that they're responsible for. So they understand which of these numbers can I actually impact? Like, how do I do that? Which ones do I impact? And what are our clear targets here that I'm responsible for reaching? So we have to give them clear KPIs and targets linked to their roles, because that's how they understand how their daily work impacts overall and bigger company goals. So that goes a lot into job satisfaction, purpose, contribution, impact, all that stuff that's really important for your team to be engaged in and involved in, because that's how they show up at a higher level. That's how they love working with you, because they feel like they're fulfilled in what they do because it actually does something, right? It actually has an important goal to it and they contribute to that. And this also empowers better decision making, and it creates more alignment across all your different areas of business that are all needing to work together, right? So the caveat with all of this is, when you go through this kind of restructure and realignment, it means you're going to have some challenging conversations, because you're going to have to be transparent about the changes you're making and maybe stuff that needs to be eliminated. But it's really important that you're honest and transparent with your team about the needs of the company, and you want to openly define this new focus for them, because the more open and transparent you are, the less they're going to feel, a lot of fear, a lot of unclarity, all that kind of stuff. And if that's not transparent, again, there's resistance, people start leaving, quiet quitting. You've heard about all of that. But every time there's challenge, every time there's change, every time there's refocus and restructure, we have to really lean into this part of clarity, definition, and focus, and being very open and honest about it. Because when you do that, it gives them new focus, And that means there's renewed energy, and it prevents future stagnation, which is where a lot of your ROI is going, is when you have stagnated roles, when people are just doing what they've always been doing because they've always done it that way, and nothing is evolving and growing the way that you need it to, so that you can keep serving the business in the way that it really needs to be served. So this is where roles have to really serve your strategic plan, and not the strategic plan serving the roles, right? We want to keep it focused on that. The roles on your team have to serve the company's strategic plan. And when you optimize your roles for results, that means now you have a full pipeline going on, and everything is coming back to highest and best use. Because if we're not in our highest and best use, what are we doing? So this improves retention, and it also improves not just not just team retention, but also client retention, because your clients feel like, this company actually keeps evolving so that my needs are being met in a better and better way, because they're looking at what do I need, and they're going to bring this to the table. So clarity is such an important headline in this, because what it creates is it creates cooperation and collaboration on your team versus disjointed efforts, which happens a lot of time when this is not something that gets regularly addressed. So we want to make sure that we create the strategy to smoothly adjust the roles to align with your revenue creation, right? So let's talk about what that could be. So for the same thing we've been talking about for weeks, is we want to make sure that you create, as the business owner, you create the plan that your team needs, so that they have the clarity that they need. And then you want to communicate that plan in advance so that they understand what's coming down the pike. And then, of course, the most important thing is like, you're not just going to talk about that plan once, you are going to talk it up, because in a transition, that is something that you have to bring in front of people all the time, because most humans don't like change very much. So as much as you can keep them focused on what's purpose, where are we going, what's the future, how's that going to benefit me, how's it going to benefit the company, but they want to know, hey, all this change, how's it going to be good for me? That's the first thing they're going to want to know. So this is something that you have to address and you have to talk about all the time. So that's number one, making sure that you have that really clear plan in place, and that you talk about it, that you talk it up, that it's something that's in front of your team all the time during that time of transition. The second thing is, now you have to make sure that you cross-train your team on the new responsibilities that are coming in, which will ease the change and also ensure that you have backup. If somebody is sick, quits, something is going on, you want to make sure that you always have more than one person like owning something, or they can own it, right? Then you want to make sure that you coach people, that you really show up as that coach, that champion, that mentor, to help them succeed in this new performance expectation. Because again, this is new. You're going to have people who need to do something they've never done before, or if they have never had targets or KPIs before, suddenly there's numbers that they have to perform to. So you want to make sure that they feel that they have a lot of support in this. So we want to make sure that you show up as that coach. And we also want to make sure that as you transition that you don't want to just throw everybody into brand new stuff. Help them kind of by having some newer projects combined with what they're already doing, so that at least part of the day they feel like they know what they're doing. This is familiar, as they're adding on new projects that they're unfamiliar with, right? So if you kind of keep this in a little bit of a balance, it makes the transition much easier for people. So shift these responsibilities gradually to kind of limit disruption and to limit the feeling of like, I don't know what I'm doing. You also want to highlight growth opportunities for people. As you make changes in your business, talk to them about career growth, talk to them about leadership opportunities, talk to them about possibilities to take on more responsibility, grow with the company. This is a conversation you should always be having with your team, especially during times of change. You want to talk to them about how this change could be good for them, because if you don't, why would they care, right? And then you want to make sure that when good things are happening, you want to recognize anybody's accomplishments publicly to really boost morale and also help them understand that this is a culture of change. We're successful in change. Change is good for us. We're creating something new and we're being successful in this, right? This is also, again, kind of like you want to plug this as much as possible. And always giving more like additional training, support, coaching to keep people's skills building, right? So as you do this, make sure that you support them in that way. And then as you restructure, nothing is going to be perfect. So you have to look at, how do I keep adjusting roles in a collaborative way? So this is important that you get feedback from your team as they're owning new roles or new responsibilities, so that you can together really look at, how can I be in the most effective and efficient place. Celebrate milestones. We already talked about that, helping them have more momentum. And then if you put people in more revenue producing roles, which is more stressful a lot of times, you want to make sure they get compensated when they do a great job. So create incentives, create some sort of profit sharing, bonuses, whatever you want to do. But the more people help you make more money, you want to help them make more money as well. And they're going to show up in a much more aligned way when they understand, hey, this is not just good for the company, this is also good for me. And then as you go through this, there's going to be ups and downs. There are going to be hiccups. Just lead with empathy during this time of change and help people own what they can own and help them show up at a higher level and feel like they're actually growing in their careers as well. So all this stuff is really important when you look at growing and scaling and always optimizing, right? The more your business evolves, the more you have to keep restructuring and optimizing, because otherwise you're going to be out of alignment. And we want to focus on those revenue producing activities, because if you don't, we're going to have a problem. So I hope this helps. We're going to talk a lot more about this in our upcoming free workshop, and I really hope all of you are going to come. It's going to be July 15 through 18. Every day we're going to show up at 12 p.m. EST, and we're going to talk about strategic planning to power profits. We're going to talk about how you can really build that autonomous self-led team that can help you have that self-led company, so it's not all on you. We're going to talk about how you can help your team to really lean in to produce more profits, and how you create that higher level team higher up for more growth. So these are kind of the strategic pieces we're going to talk about. Like I said, it's a free training. Hope to see you there. Have a great rest of your week and weekend, and I'll see you next time.